Hi, everyone. I'm Jeremiah Dalton, and welcome back to the Long Island Legends podcast, the only podcast showcasing the extraordinary talent that we have right here on Long Island. And today, I am joined by the owner of Velocity House Buyers. He's a flipper, wholesaler, landlord. He's been doing real estate full-time for 10 years. Okay, get this. He was flipping real estate before he was old enough to even have a legal drink. He operates in New York, Delaware, and Seattle, and he grew up in Orange County, New York. He's done 350 deals since 2016. His name is Greg Helbeck, and one of my closest friends. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is quite the introduction there, buddy.
You're very welcome. I wish I could be even better, actually. Just so our audience knows, so this podcast is dedicated primarily to bringing on the legendary figures on Long Island. But every once in a while, we're going to go off the island a little bit because I think it's important for people who are watching this to take inspiration from people that are really making an impact in their community. And the fact is that, we have a lot of people that watch this show that are interested in real estate, right? But operating and flipping real estate in New York is hard and it's expensive,
Yes.
right? So wholesaling is a great way to get started, okay? And obviously you operate in New York under the same rules and regulations that we all operate under. So, and the fact that you did it at such a young age, I thought it'd be perfect to have you on the show and talk about it because I think people on Long Island who want to go down this route will really get a lot out of this.
Absolutely. And I always tell people, they ask me, why do you still invest in New York? Why is it worth it? And it is worth it. You just have to understand how it works. And you can also operate in New York and do it in another market as well. And I know there's a friend you have here that I think lives on Long Island but does it in Alabama.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you can make it work anywhere now with technology. It's wild.
Absolutely. And to that point, for those that are watching, right? You don't have to operate in New York, right? I think it's a great state to do business in. I think especially with everything going on around the country, right?
Yeah.
You have to start dialing into, you can't just flip anywhere. You have to find the right market. So working here, I think if you can find a way to overcome those barriers to entry, I think you'll do exceptionally well.
Yeah.
But that said, New York's not the only place to invest, and you're able to do it in multiple markets. You're living in Seattle, you're flipping in Seattle, you're flipping in Delaware, you're flipping in New York, right?
Yeah.
I know a lot of real estate investors, we both do. I don't think anybody has the ability to just be able to go into another market and understand it and immerse themselves so efficiently and quickly as you do.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, I used to do it in San Diego before. So
yes.
everywhere I would live, I lived in San Diego for a while.
Yeah.
I would flip there. I always would want to flip where I'm physically living because
sure.
it's easy. It's
Yeah.
I'm there, whatever. Reno, I did a
Yes,
couple
I
deals
remember
there.
that.
I lived there for a hot second. And then once I got to Seattle, I'm like, okay, well, let's run it back. Let's get after this,
So let's take it to the beginning, right? You're a 20-year-old kid, right? I'm thinking about this, right? Here's this 20-year-old kid that says, I'm going to start flipping real estate in New York, the hardest market in the country.
Yeah.
I can't even get into a bar, right?
It's a true story.
Okay. You still have a youthful look. You just turned 30, right? I was at your birthday party.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about what the 20-year-old Greg Helbeck was like just getting into this business.
Yeah.
Was there any fear, any trepidation? For me, I started at 30, and that seemed daunting. What was it like for you at such an early age?
Yeah, so I was playing hockey, and when that road ended, I was back in my parents' basement because I was living in Massachusetts playing hockey, and I was playing junior hockey, so I wasn't even going to college at the time. So I had no plan whatsoever, basically 2 years after high school. So I remember sitting back in my parents' basement, living for free, going to community college because they forced me to go. And I was just thinking to myself every night, what am I going to do? What am I going to do for a career? I don't want to have a job. I want to make money. I wanted to make money in the National Hockey League, and that didn't work out. So now I'm like, well, how do I make the same amount of money I'd make in the show in business? And I was just looking into things. I was looking in the stock market, looking into commodities.
You looked into day trade. You looked into day trading. I did
stock
that,
market, commodities trading, options trading, all that kind of stuff. And my buddy actually got a postcard in the mail, physically to his, mailbox. And then he sent me a Snapchat, which is this is back when Snapchat was just coming out. I'm kind of dating myself.
A little bit. Yeah.
And it was come to this local real estate event in Newburgh. And that's 30 minutes away from where I'm from in Monroe. And we went to this event. It was me, ironically, not the friend who sent me the postcard, and then my other buddy, Kevin. So the three of us went there, and they were talking about wholesaling houses and double closing and flipping and all this stuff. And I don't know what.
Do you remember who did the?
Yeah, it was. They actually got sued from the FTC, and I got a refund check.
Oh, really?
About a year ago for $42. So yeah, this is true.
Okay.
This is crazy.
Okay.
It was actually masked by the Flip or Flop people, Tarek El Moussa and his wife at the time.
Oh, okay.
They were like the face of it, but then it was getting ran by like this big like training education company in Utah. And it was a whole kind of sham. So
Gotcha.
they got busted, and
Okay.
everyone got, I guess, reimbursed a bit. So. Anyway, so they're talking about, change your life flipping houses and you don't need any money and this, that, and the other. And this is really before real estate investing was even an industry. Like this, it wasn't very popular.
It was HGTV,
Yeah.
A&E TV. It was there.
Yeah.
There were people that were doing
Yeah.
it. The popularity has skyrocketed.
Not even close to what it is
Yeah,
today. Yeah,
yeah.
like there wasn't a lot of podcasts. There was maybe 6 or 7 of them.
Yeah, Bigger
YouTube.
Pockets. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Sean Terry, Flip to Freedom and all that. So like the information was still kind of, there wasn't an abundant amount of it like there is now. So I remember, I went to the podcast, or not the podcast, the training, and then they upsold us. They were like, well, if you want to really learn how to get to the next level, you got to come to the 3-day event in Yonkers, which is like 45 minutes south of Monroe. So it's all like local stuff. So me and Devin were like, let's do this. Like it's $2,000 and you could take someone for free. So $1,000 each. I had $2,000 in the bank from like cutting lawns.
Yep.
And we signed up. Kevin didn't want to do it. So me and Devin did it. We went down to Yonkers like 2 weeks later. It was like I think it was 2 days. It was like 8 hours a day. They just, everything you need to know about real estate. Fix and flipping. It was like out of a textbook, right?
Yeah,
it was just
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like
yeah,
some
yeah.
presenter. But after the second event, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. Like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a real estate investor somehow, some way. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was never scared to take action. I just knew I had to get leads, because that's the number one thing they were talking about was you need to know how to get leads. If you can get leads and make offers, you will get deals. So it took me 9 months hanging bandit signs, writing letters, got my first property in Poughkeepsie with my buddy Dave Brown, because I didn't know what I was doing. New York is so hard. I didn't have money for earnest money or anything like that. So I found a distressed property. We got it under contract. We did an assignment deal, which in New York is not as easy as people think, because they learn it in another state. And I made $5,000, because it was a $10K assignment fee. I came back home to my parents because they saw me working like a mule, basically having to pay to work because I was buying signs, buying this.
How long was it from when you decided at that event to when the deal closed?
9 months.
It was 9 months.
It was 9 months of basically working like a lunatic.
Okay.
Every weekend, bandit signs, like all over the Hudson Valley.
What was that? I remember you telling me. Tell the listeners about your system for bandit signs.
Oh, yes. So the code enforcement would not be working on the weekends. So I would put them out Friday afternoon at like 2, and I'd let them run all weekend. And then Sunday at like 6, I'd pick them up. So I wouldn't get fined very often because they weren't really there, right? Maybe they could take a picture of it and call me on the next
How many
business day.
bandit signs?
Hundreds.
So you had.
I was in Rockland County Facebook group saying like, who is this Alex buys houses guy? He's flooding my town, and Yonkers, it was a problem. I was doing it everywhere. Yonkers, Rockland, Orange County. Cause like, I know
So Alex was you.
Yeah. I didn't want to put my name because I don't want them to tie the name, whatever. So, Alex is out of the office. I'm sorry. This is Greg. I can buy your house though,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but that worked so well because it was cheap. I mean, especially back then.
And you were getting calls.
Getting deals. And they're motivated. Think about it. If you're calling a bandit sign, you're pretty motivated.
But like from the moment you put out those bandit signs, right? The phone started ringing.
They started ringing instantly.
But obviously it took you 9 months to close the first deal.
Yeah.
So just shed a little light on that if you could.
So number one, I didn't know what to value. Like I didn't know how to value properties. I barely knew how to use Zillow. And I could barely get 2 words out of my mouth with these sellers. Like they're calling a 20-year-old kid to sell the biggest asset they have. And I sound like I have marbles in my mouth. And they're like, all right, was this guy? And then I can't even buy it. I'm assigning it, right? So I'm assigning your contract for a fee. Call here, this number. So I had no idea what I was doing. And me and Devin in the beginning would get these crazy good opportunities where they were pretty motivated, but we just couldn't close them. We had no idea what to do. And we didn't have any mentors. And it was a struggle. And finally, that first deal we got, the lady was basically a laydown. She's like, I need to get rid of this thing for like $52,000 in Poughkeepsie, which back in the day was cheap. And now it's like, you can't even buy a quarter of a lot for that in Poughkeepsie. And anyway, Dave Brown, thankfully, was able to like hold my hand and guide me through it and get the buyer. And then when I got the proof of concept, then I started doing it more frequently. And then
Replicated.
I understood, like, okay, like this obviously works. And especially, I was listening to podcasts, people doing deals in North Carolina, Virginia, Missouri. And I'm like, well, what's going on? Like, New York is so hard. I can't do any of that. I have to put down 1,000, 2,000, 3,000,
Yeah.
you know? And I'm like, why? There's attorneys. Like, everything that I was listening to wasn't lining up with the reality of New York. So it was just even harder because I was like basically getting information and then I was going out and doing it and it wasn't the same because New York is so hard. So it really, I think that's another reason why it took me longer is because I was in New York and I just had no choice but to accept it.
Gotcha. Now, the bandit signs. So Friday, you'd put how long did it take you to put out the bandit signs?
Well, it depends on where I'm going. If I went to like
On average,
3-4 hours.
3-4 hours.
Because I would go from like Rockland up to New Windsor, which is a decent ride.
And then Monday, you said Sunday?
Sunday evening, I'd take them out.
You take them down.
Yeah.
And that was something that you did religiously
every week,
weekend.
like clockwork.
Every weekend.
With a podcast in my car.
Gotcha. And then you obviously were, during this time, getting calls, fielding calls, right? But this whole time, 9 months goes by, which is a decent amount of time.
Yeah.
No money coming in.
Zero.
What kept you going during that time?
Going to garage sales and buying stuff and then reselling it for like $50 to $100 margins.
Okay. So you were...
I didn't want a job. I refused to get a job.
Sure.
Yeah. I would just literally go to garage sales and I would like look on my phone and be like, you can sell this on eBay for, $40 and I offer them $5.
Yeah.
AC units were really good. I'd pick those up for free sometimes from knuckleheads.
Gotcha.
And I'd go resell them for $300. This one guy left an Anderson window out in the garbage. And I'm like, what are you doing with that window? He's like, it's going in the trash on Tuesday. I said, let me have it. He's like, no problem. I sold it for like $300.
Okay.
Like an hour later. I'm like, so just finding ways to make deals. You know, and obviously real estate was a lot harder and the sales cycle was longer. But I found a way to kind of keep money coming in so I could keep this real estate dream alive.
But now, going back to the 9-month period, like you're saying to yourself, all right, I'm making some decent money, flipping stuff from garage sales, etc. What is keeping you going, knowing that there's no money has come in during this time made from real estate?
I knew that eventually when I would figure it out, it was going to be worth it. And I saw other people making hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'm like, if they can do it, and they've been doing it longer than me, if I stick this out and get through like the suck phase, especially in the beginning, because it's so hard because you have no experience, I'm like, this is going to be worth it. And I would just, kind of keep that mantra in my head. And then when I got that first check, because I knew it was going to be a dogfight to get that thing.
Sure.
I knew it. I was like, okay, like we're here. We got a check. Let's keep doing this. And let's get a little smarter with our advertising. Because eventually I graduated from bandit signs. And I'd take the money I'd make and I would invest it in the mailers and whatnot.
So from your first deal to your second deal, do you remember the time frame in between those
like
two?
4 months.
4 months.
Brutal. Yeah.
But better. But now you just cut it down in half. So you went from 9 months, right?
Yeah.
Then you went to 4 months,
Yes.
right? Okay, because I'm thinking about this on my own end. I remember when I decided I wanted to get into flipping, it was January of 15 or something like that. And I think you and I basically started
at the same time. Yeah.
You were 20, I was 30, right? We started at the same time. And it was a full year later that I had sold my first flip and made the money. The money came in the bank. It was a full year later.
Okay.
The second one was 9 months later.
Wow.
Yeah. But then all of a sudden, like it speeds up.
It snowballs quick. You get that momentum, and then you're like, whoa.
But you understand, like the first, in essence, like 2 years, right? Now, I had a job at this time. So I was able to just, still keep the lights on.
Yeah.
But for those that are looking to get into real estate investing, understand that like you have to either have a job like I did, you have to have some additional side hustle. Obviously, you had the benefit of, people say, oh, well, 20 years old, that's too young to get into real estate. But like you didn't really have any obligations.
Zero.
Yeah.
No, so, I'm lucky for that. And
Yeah.
I'm grateful for that. And that's a fact because I do tell that to people. I was 20, so I was young and naive. I could have been, doing other stuff that's not productive, but I chose to do the business. But I did have no overhead for the most part. I had a car payment and, food I'd have to eat. But I was living with my parents, going to college. I was a full-time college kid doing this too. I eventually graduated college, like 4-year school, before I ended up moving out of the house. But yeah, no, I had a lot of, good situations going on. But at the same time, I also had obligations like school and, hanging out with my friends. So I found a way to make it all work. But in the beginning, I took it so serious to where like I just told myself, no matter what, I'm going to figure this out. This business works. It's not a scam. Like people are doing it. And this, like I said, this is before real estate was like really like the wave.
Yeah.
Because now it's like, you type in wholesaling and it's like ChatGPT is like What
Yeah,
do you want to know
forget
about wholesaling?
yeah,
I have
forget about
a
it.
million data files on it.
Now, as this is going, right, do you remember the moment where you were, like, finally like, "This is a business"? Like, you always
Yeah.
believe that it
Yeah.
will be, right? But believing it and then actually seeing it come
Yeah.
to fruition where you're like you never feel like obviously, we've been doing this a long
Yeah.
time. We've done hundreds and hundreds of deals,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But you never feel like you got it per
Yeah.
se. But there's a point in time, and I can actually remember to the point where, I was like, "Okay, like, this will work,"
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
This is a proven model.
There's a proven model, like,
Yeah.
I can do this on a regular basis, I can make a living, right? Which is
Yeah.
really all you ever wanted to
Yep.
do, right? Is just be able to make a living. When
Yep.
was that point for you?
That was a long time after, actually. It took, so that was, I started in 15 in September. I didn't have like full-time 6-figure income in real estate until like mid-year 2018.
Mhm.
Like full-time, like couple $100,000 of like net income. And it was from actually doing virtual investing, because New York, I got decent at it, but I was still struggling with these cash flow issues because the sales cycle, even on assignments, would take 3 or 4 months
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
So I was like at a point where I was doing deals, doing 15K, 20K deals, nothing crazy, but I was relying on exclusive buyers, and they would give me the number they'd give me, and that was it. I didn't understand how to have an email list. So I was still kind of like, I was making money, but I didn't feel like I was really in control because I was too dependent on buyers and then New York. But I was really good at marketing. I understood how to get deals, and I understood how to find distressed sellers through like lists and data and mailers. So I had an epiphany, actually. I did a deal where I made, I think, 15 grand, and it was a vacant house in Greenwood Lake. And if I would have kept that house, forget about it. Like, got it for $100,000 that I got the seller to take. It was on the lake with a boat, like house in the back. Like, this thing's worth like 1.5 million bucks, no problem now. And the guy ended up knocking it down. But anyway, I wholesaled it to another guy who wholesaled it, and I made 15 grand. He made like 85 grand.
Oh, wow.
But, it's all good. It's all good. I'm not going to count other people's money. But I realized, I was like, that owner was delinquent on their taxes, and their house was vacant, and it was inherited. What if I just found properties that were that?
Yeah.
And I used a list, and I used like a list stacker, which didn't exist back then. I kind of created one. And I was like, what if I just did that? But I did this in another market too, because it was like, pain point number one was like, some of the leads were like, they had to move out or whatever, but this was vacant. They were ready to go right away. And then the other issue was New York, the attorneys, the down payments, the sales cycle. So I said, if I took this model of vacant houses and I did it in an area where there's no attorneys, I wonder if I would have more success. So what I ended up doing in 2018, in the beginning of the year, I think it was like January 3rd of 2018, I pulled a list in Dallas, Texas, because I was in a mastermind back then called Investor Fuel.
Yes.
And it was based in Dallas. So I met people there, and I had some connections. And I started cold calling vacant properties that were back on taxes that were most likely inherited. And I started getting these virtual leads where these people were like, oh, yeah, that was my mom's house. I don't know what to do with it. I just want to get rid of it. And I was like, oh, my gosh. And there was like hundreds of them there, like, because it's a huge city. And I had connections there. So I ended up like, this took now about 2 months. So now we're like March 2018. I got a lady. She was like, I want to sell this thing for like $15,000. I just want to get rid of it. Like, she owed like 10 in taxes. She wanted 5 in her pocket. I called up a guy that I knew, and I've never done a virtual deal at this point. I've never done something out of state. And I didn't think it was possible. I'm like, there's no way you can do that.
Yeah, sure.
Call this guy up. He goes out there. He gets her to sign the contract. We wholesale that. We made 20 grand, 10,000 to me, but I never went to the house, never met the seller, got the wire. And then literally a week later, we made 30 grand. So I got 15 back. And then I had a whole database full of these prospects. And then at that point, but from March until like July, I probably made like $75,000, like in a windfall, plus the New York deals. And then I signed a lease and moved out to California. Now I had 2 or 3 closings a month coming in,
Gotcha.
where I was bringing in, 10 to 20K to me. And I had some money saved up. And then that's how my like career got started in terms of like being like an established real estate guy.
And, we talk about this because a lot of people get started at wholesaling in real estate. But you don't realize there's a lot that goes into it,
Yes.
right? There's a lot.
Yeah.
And there's some people who just, wholesale on the side, right?
Yeah.
They're a solo operation, right? At what point did you realize, okay, this is now, I can make a living doing this, right?
Yeah.
But beyond making a living, right, the next stage is, how does this actually become a business that can operate without me in the trenches every single day? Did that happen right after?
No, that took a while. So I basically went from exclusively wholesaling to then eventually saving up enough cash to where me and the guy Jason in Texas would close cash on these cheap properties in Dallas, and we would wholesale them. And then we would like double our profits. So now I'm like, well, wholesaling's kind of stupid on some of these deals. Like, what, we have the cash, like we're paying, 40 grand for a house, 20 each. Closing costs are like $100 down there. I'm like, whatever. So we started wholesaling, and now I built up a nest egg to where I wanted to then go back into New York, because that strategy, even though it works and you can get good deals, you're calling all day. You have to keep hunting. They're not calling you. There's only so many of those properties in any area, because I had like most of them in my database at that point, because I was spending 4 hours a day doing this. So I eventually went back into New York, and I started marketing with direct mail, because I had the budget and the systems and I had the knowledge now. And then I had the money saved up to where I'd started getting the hard money loans, and I would wholesale houses. I'd buy a property in Rockland County. I'd clean it out, put a little paint and polish, resell it. And
before really wholesaling was a thing.
Yeah, it was like, it was just like a little insider thing. You just clean it out and relist it. So I remember I made $100,000 net on a deal in Rockland, and that was like one of my goals for the year, was to make 100 G's on one transaction. I did that, and I never got a hard money loan. I didn't even understand what it was. And I got Lending Home back then, which is now Kiavi.
Yeah.
They gave me the money. I had the down payment. It worked out. I made 100 G's, and I was like, wow, this is crazy. So then at that point, I shifted my focus from just being a wholesaler or a virtual like guy to like, okay, I want to like really build up this velocity business in New York from San Diego, like living remotely, because now I feel like I have the capital, the experience, and I have these relationships in the Hudson Valley that I've developed over like at that point 3 or 4 years, to where then I hired an assistant in like 2020 maybe.
Okay.
And I was reluctant to do that, but I was very busy. I was like, oh, I don't know. Like I have so much things going on. I don't have the time. I hired an assistant. I always had VAs kind of doing odds and ends stuff. But then once I found Brett, who's a very good friend of mine and a partner in Delaware, he reached out to me because he was working with another real estate investor in Florida, but they didn't really have the deal flow to support his goals. So he approached me because before he worked with me, I would send him out to houses to put lock boxes on. I'd give him like $1,000 at the closing, whatever. And he was like, hey, like this guy, Greg, seems like he's doing deals. Sure. He actually brought me his neighbor's house. Okay. I paid him 6 G's on that, because he thought I was going to give him a $1,000 referral fee. I paid him 6 G's. I made like 95 on the house. It was literally his neighbor's house. It was a banged up, vacant house. So rehabbed it. So he saw the whole rehab go down. He's like, oh, wow, this is awesome. I want to work with Greg. So he approached me. I was reluctant because I was a little scared, because I'm like, well, I make money for myself and the assistant, but can I support your goals? Like I was like very, fearful of it. But I eventually decided to say, let's do this. I got him on board. He started buying houses, and he was basically dealing with all the sellers, and he's much better than me at that because he has all day to do it, and he's just a very good communicator. And once him and I teamed up, we started, really taking off and making it a business. But that wasn't until 2021.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And that's the thing that my story works a little different because I didn't have the time. Right.
Yeah.
I had some money because I had like a decent job. I was able to obviously, flip houses. And I got lucky. The first couple of deals I found were things back when, you could find something on the MLS, a bank owned property.
Days. Yeah, REO. Yep.
And so I made some money with that. And then I took that money and then I reinvested it into direct to seller marketing. Right, which brought even more deals. I was doing this while having a full-time job.
That's impressive, man.
So but the nice thing about it was that I was able to stockpile cash, reinvest in marketing, but I had to, in essence, develop a business, right? I had to, I very quickly jumped. Like I said, the first 2 years were just me kind of figuring it out, kind of handling as much as I could. But once I understood like the basics of it, I pretty quickly went into, was like, all right, let me just get an admin, somebody to turn on and off the utilities, answer the phones. I was relying on realtors to go out and see houses for me. I was obviously having contractors do the work. And so I was doing all of that while working a full-time job, right? And people don't realize, like, with real estate investing, like, it sounds cool, right?
Yeah.
And yes, like in the beginning, you should do all the work yourself.
Oh, yeah.
But eventually, like, you're only going to be as good as the team that's around you.
100%, especially in the flipping business.
Yes.
And even wholesaling. I mean, that's a little bit of a different model. But if you're closing on properties and you have the deed and the utilities in your name, whether you're going to do a big rehab or a little rehab, you need an A+ team. Yeah. Because it can get so hairy if you don't, especially with the realtors.
Yes.
That's especially in New York. I mean, we're New York guys. Like it's a big deal. And the contractor. I mean, we could talk about this for 4 hours. You need a team and a system and a way to go about stuff, and even a criteria too. Like I see people, they'll buy anything that they think could make money. I'm like, well, that's how you get hurt,
Yeah.
honestly. When you invest in something you don't understand, it's a different asset. And I've gotten burned doing that.
Yeah, so
You
have
know,
I.
yeah, I've gotten smoked just
Yeah,
buying
and
assets
even in my
that made
own
no
market.
sense. In my own, me too.
Yeah.
In my own market, losing money because I didn't know what I was doing because I was not familiar with that asset.
Yeah, I mean, for me, where I've run into problems is because Long Island is very diverse in terms of like, even though it's a very strong market overall, there's certain pockets that are not as hot as others. There's certain houses that in those markets just appeal to certain types of buyers, right? So it's very like niche oriented where, you know, you could do something that's really nice in a nice market, but the people that live in that particular area just that doesn't quite fit what
It's not their vibe.
It's not their
And
vibe.
then you're sitting there, days on market goes up, and you're like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna probably lose on this
Yeah,
house.
so those are where like we've sort of like fine-tuned where, you know, a lot of older houses I will pass on. You know what I mean?
Me too. The money I've lost on houses, I'm pretty sure all of them were like built before 1935.
Yeah, no, and that's a big
They're a
reason
nightmare
behind
to
it.
rehab.
Yeah, and not only they're a nightmare to rehab, but then people go in them and like they even if they feel new,
They're not. Yeah.
They're not. You could still tell that it's
creaking
old.
floors.
It's creaking floors.
Basements
it's small.
pinned.
It's small rooms. It's small basements. It has things that, unfortunately, especially now with high interest rates, high property values, like people are like, yeah, no, I'll keep looking.
Not interested in it. And then you're sitting there stuck with it, paying monthly interest or whatever. So it's like that's the thing with flipping houses, especially in New York. You got to know that market and you got to have that team lined up on the front end in your like actual business, and then like the vendors and the people that you hire, because that's how I'm able to do it from Seattle in New York. And I mean, I come back to New York quite often for fun, and I go out into the field to see what's going on. But like, I don't ever need to go. You don't ever need to go. You live here.
Yeah, no, and I don't go to any of the houses. I refuse, right? I mean, and that becomes a byproduct of saying, well, why am I going? Right?
You don't bring any value if you show up.
Yeah. In fact, I probably make things worse.
Yeah, because then I'm like, oh, well, let me do this.
Yeah, you overthink things, and so that's definitely a big factor. I wanted to talk about your wholesaling real estate in New York, the most regulated market in the country, right? How are you able to do it, still provide a good service to the seller, who's ultimately your customer? What have you felt has been because there's a lot of wholesalers, as you know, that burn bridges.
Oh.
You've been able to do this for a sustained period of time in a hard market. What has been the biggest factor for you to be able to keep operating at the level you're operating at?
That's a good question. So wholesale, like you said, it's a very transient industry. Like, you know, people want to get rich wholesaling and then they go out the door the next day. So when we're wholesaling houses with the sellers, if we are not intending to close on it, like if I don't like the numbers or the location and I don't want to buy it no matter what, we will tell the seller, we are going to assign this. So we are giving you an offer that we're going to make to you, but we're going to go out and find an end buyer. And if we can't find an end buyer, we're not going to come through here. So you need to understand that is the risk you're facing because of the location, the price, et cetera, you name it. So we're transparent with the owner so they understand what's going on in the event that we're not going to close. Because there are some deals that I might wholesale that I'd buy no matter what. So whether I wholesale it or flip it, the seller's getting their number and it's not going to impact the closing date or anything like that. But if we're not closing, we're telling the owner up front, we are wholesaling this, and there's going to be a third-party buyer involved. And the seller either accepts that or denies that, but they can never come back and say, hey, well, he said he was buying my house, but then he really sold it to someone else. We are very big on disclosing stuff, especially in New York where there's lawyers and there's a lot of red tape. So that's the first thing we do, and that has really worked well for us. The second thing is actually with the buyers. So when the buyer, like I have a very good buyers list in the Hudson Valley, Rockland, Westchester. When I put out a deal, people come to me right away because they know that not only are the numbers good, but I'm going to sell to the first person and I'm going to keep my word and I'm not going to like screw someone over for 10 grand. So like, for example, I put in the emails, first come, first serve, first person to make, this offer at ask price gets the deal. There's no bidding wars because we used to do that, but the market changed. So we can get into that if you want. So the buyers know, like, if I give them my word, they are going to be able to buy that house. I'm not going to call them back an hour later and say, hey, someone else came in, they offered 30 grand more. I'm sorry. Like, so the buyers respect me because they know that I'm serious and I stick to doing what I say I'm going to do. So it gets them to act quickly on my deals, right? And I have all these different buyers in certain areas and they'll pay crazy prices for these houses. It's crazy because the inventory is so diverse in Long Island and the Hudson Valley. So I know like what guys will buy in what area, what guys will buy in this area. Some guys will pay a premium just because just where it's located. It might be next to a church or whatever. So I just know my market so well, and the buyers, I have so many buyers and they respect me and I respect them. it's like when they get an email from Greg with an off market, and they also know that I flip.
Yeah.
So they know, like, I know the numbers. Like,
Do
I'm
you
not
ever
just
come across any like pushback being like, well, why aren't you buying this?
that's a great question.
Yeah.
I say, I got too many projects going on right
Okay.
now, which is true.
Yeah,
I'm too busy. I got this,
yeah.
I got that, I got something in Washington. So
Yeah.
they know, like, I'm like an active player. I have rentals. They see, they see that I've been established for a while. So, I mean, those are really the two things: is the disclosure with the seller if you don't intend to close. Because, like, a lot of investors, they'll say anything
just
and they'll
get
step
the
over their
deal.
grandma's neck to get a house. But
Doesn't
then when it
matter,
comes
yeah.
to the deliverable of the service, it's a train wreck.
Oh yeah,
It's a train wreck. And we just always
I picked up a lot of deals.
Yeah,
that
I
have
get a lot
gone-
of houses from that from like recovering
deals
sellers.
go sideways.
Yep,
Yeah.
wholesaler can't close. They call me and we get it done right away. So that's the first thing. And then the buyers, having the relationship with them. A lot of these guys know me very well. I've been around for 10 years, so like it's a small world.
Yeah.
And I just think it's being upfront and people know that I'm a big player up there in the Hudson Valley. And like when I put out a deal, I'm serious about it. And it's funny, I just wholesaled one house this week and it got sold in like 2 hours. And I'm getting emails like 4 hours later, hey, is this sold?
Mm-hmm.
So like I get like overflow of people reaching out after it's sent out, and they always know it's sold.
Yeah.
Like these things move. They
Yeah.
move quick. So they know I got a good product on my hands.
It's funny, we've been talking. So for the audience that doesn't know, right, what actual wholesaling is, because
Yeah.
we've been talking about it
yeah.
like,
Yeah,
it's
like
a
second
common thing.
nature.
But for those that don't know, right, when you go to buy real estate, right, typically you want to buy a house for $300,000. You put earnest money down,
Yeah.
right, and you close and you pay that seller $300,000, right?
Yep.
And let's say you're an end buyer like me that buys, renovates, and resells. I might put $100,000 into it, and my
Yep.
goal is to sell it for, let's just say, $550,000. But there's other people, right, that will pay maybe a little bit more than I would, right? So maybe my max price is $300,000, but there's other investors out there that would pay $320,000, $330,000. Wholesaling gives you the option, we're going to talk about it in just a second, where you can assign to another buyer for however much more, you want to sell it for. Let's just say $330,000, right?
Yeah. That would make
And
sense.
you close, okay, and you keep the $30,000 difference. So for the audience that doesn't
Yeah.
know that what that is, that's wholesaling. How do you overcome the objections with the attorneys? Because as you said,
Yeah.
hey, it's an attorney state.
Yeah,
Other people
yeah.
don't have this in
Yeah.
other parts of the country, right?
Yeah.
People can just write up a contract,
Yeah,
put
that doesn't work
$1
anymore. It
down,
doesn't work.
$100 down on
Yeah.
contract, and it's a legally binding
Yep.
contract. Granted,
And they file a memorandum on it,
And
which
they-
is insane.
yeah, well, some do, some don't. I
Yeah.
mean, you do hear about like these sellers that are, people that are like buying houses, and the sellers are taking an offer from somebody, but then taking an offer from somebody
Yep.
else.
That's happened to us.
That's happened
to us.
times. You don't really have that as much in New York because you
No.
have that legal protection.
Yeah.
But it's much easier to get a deal under contract.
Yeah.
Maybe harder to hold the seller's feet to the fire.
Yep. That's the problem out of state.
That's the
is
problem
you
out of state.
can't-
So
yeah.
there is there's the opposite effect. But how do you overcome in an attorney state?
Yeah.
Obviously having the wherewithal, right? The legal capacity to assign this deal.
Yeah.
What is the objections that you receive and how you overcome them?
So regarding the actual assignment objection, I can double close in New York with the end buyer's funds, and it's no problem.
Gotcha. So you don't know
If
necessarily
it's
need-
assignable or not, I don't care.
It doesn't
It
matter.
does.
Okay.
And we're doing it right now in Poughkeepsie. It's just that there's no assignability, but I'm just going to do a back-to-back double close with
Gotcha.
the end buyer's money,
Yeah.
which is legal. I'm
Yep.
not giving legal
You
advice.
do have to pay a little extra fee, right?
Transfer tax.
Yeah.
Yep. And you might get banged twice on a legal fee because it's technically two deeds.
Yeah.
But you're paying.
Is
a
it
little
two
bit more.
recording fees?
You're paying for the deed to get recorded twice.
Gotcha.
You're paying the transfer tax on the difference.
Gotcha.
So it's not that bad, actually.
Yeah,
No, it's
okay.
not that bad because the transfer tax in New York isn't that bad.
It's $4 for every
Yeah,
thousand.
it's not bad at all. So that's an easy objection in New York. If we're going to assign it or we want to get an assignment in there for some reason, I've noticed that, like we just had the scenario. I'll walk you through an actual deal. This was literally last week. Chester, New York, really good area. Seller has an attorney. The attorney's doing all, they prepare the contract in New York. And we went back and said, hey, we need this assignable. And he says, no problem. I'll make it assignable. I'll change page 9 out. So a lot of times if you ask, as long as the terms the client is getting, like if the contract is favoring the seller, where like you have to close by a certain, if you have honor before date and the deposit's like, reasonable, whether you assign it or not, as long as those terms are still there, like the seller's still, they're still going to be obligated to close no matter what, right? Just if it's assignable or not. So we haven't had a big issue with attorneys striking down assignment deals for us.
Now, why did you need this one assignable?
Because I just wanted to see if I could get away with it. Honestly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Because like it does when you do an assignment,
Yeah,
it's
it's
definitely
easier.
easier. You just assign it and you're out of the deal, right?
Yeah.
But if you have to double close, then it's like, oh, you're lining up the funding or whatever. So anyway, we'll try to get the assignability if we can, but if we can't, we'll double close.
Yeah.
The biggest issue though is the earnest money deposit. So if you're brand new and you have, no money in New York, you got to put at minimum $1,000 down. That's like bare bones in New York.
That's
1,000 is like low, right? But if you're dealing with a typical seller's attorney who's not familiar with real estate investing deals, they're usually going to ask for 10%.
Yes.
So if you're buying a house for $250K and it's a fixer, which is, cheap in our area, they're expecting you to put down $25,000. So you need to negotiate. You either need to put that deposit down, which we do, right? If it's a good deal, I don't care.
Yeah, sure.
I'm buying it no matter what, right?
In fact, sometimes I'll up my deposit
to beat out the other guys. I'll put 50
listen,
grand down, non-refundable.
Yeah,
say, let's go.
Yeah, because I'm that serious about the house.
Exactly. So that's a huge advantage. But if it's something where we don't want to put down 30 grand, we'll just negotiate and I'll decide, okay, the most I'll put down here is 8 grand. So if they don't want to, come to the table or they don't want to accept 8K, we'll walk from the deal. Because that's our only option, right? The only thing we could maybe send it to an investor and have them pay us a backdoor assignment, but at that point, the deal is probably not that juicy if we're at that point and we're arguing over a deposit.
Yeah.
Because if it's a good deal, we're putting it no matter what they want down. I don't care. But the secret to wholesaling, in my opinion, is not being an exclusive wholesaler. Because then you're putting yourself in one box. You have one exit strategy. There's so many other ways you can make money on houses besides assignments. So when I shifted from just assigning stuff back in 2018 to actually closing and doing rehabs and rentals, it opens up my box of exits.
Does, yeah.
So now it's I want to assign this. I got too many projects going on. I don't like the location, whatever the case might be. It's just a tool in my tool belt. But once you get past those hurdles in New York and you understand what to expect, you're not going to be disappointed when it takes a little bit longer to get in a contract because you're negotiating over. Oh, another thing too is knowing what's if your end buyer wants to close with no violations, but then you have a contract with the seller saying you're buying it with the violations, you need to understand that. Your attorney has to know what's going on because I've gotten burned back in the day where we went into contract with any and all open permits and then the end buyer's rider had clear violations and then you're stuck there in the middle and you're all right, I don't know what to do here.
Yes.
So that's the little details here. You really got to know how the game works here because it's so much different than
Yeah, it is because everywhere else is there's New York and then there's the Wild West, which is the rest of the country.
And there's no municipal searches in other places.
Yeah.
San Diego, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
You get red tagged, but that's you got caught doing work without a permit, but that's anywhere. New York, there's open municipal searches. I mean, it's a mess.
Oh, yeah. And, if something goes wrong with the property, you have a violation because you did something you shouldn't have done. Yeah. Right? That's on title now.
Huge problem.
Yes.
Yep.
And so I want people to understand this, right? If you're watching this and you're looking to get into real estate, there's a lot of opportunity here in New York. And I've said this many, many times, right? We do have way too much regulation, right?
Yes.
And that has unfortunately kept people from building homes, expanding homes, et cetera, right? It's also kept the inventory levels down.
Yeah.
And because it kept the inventory levels down, prices have gone up. So if you can work around all that red tape, okay, and if you could deal with attorneys that, listen, I mean, I know in New York and Long Island, you can sometimes get an assignment in there depending on who the attorney is. Yeah. A lot of times there's no assignment language, right? Because they know exactly.
They know you're flipping it.
They know exactly what you're doing, right? So you have to have the ability to double close. You have to have the ability to put large amounts of down payments down, right? And you have to be comfortable with potentially losing that money if the deal goes south, right?
That's the thing. You have no out in that contract in New York because you do your inspection before you sign, not after.
Not after. So
technically, you could get it in there, but
in New York, you do your inspection before you go to contract.
Yep.
Most places in the country, including Jersey, there's an inspection.
Yeah, and there's attorney review in there too.
There's attorney review. There's an inspection contingency. I remember I was actually going to buy a house in New Jersey before we bought in Long Island.
To live in?
But buy on Long Island. Yeah, before that, when we were living in Jersey, and we had an inspection contingency, right? And then there's attorney review, inspection contingency, and then you go to contract. When I bought my house here in New York, I was like, oh, well, I'll just do my inspection and then we'll go to contract and then I'll just do my inspection. And then this is when I just bought my personal residence. And if it doesn't work out, I'll get out of it. And the attorney's like, you can't do that.
You can't get out of it. Yeah.
And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, no. You do your inspection first, right? Yes. And so there's a lot of things that, once you sign that contract and you put that money down, Like if you're investing in New York, you have to be prepared to close or lose that money.
100%.
Right?
That's
And
why you want to try to get it down as low as you can.
yeah, so the point is that like there's a big barrier to
Yeah.
entry here. There's a lot of red tape. There's municipal searches. There's attorneys. There's high down payments. Right? There's
Loans take a long time to close.
long take a
when
long
you're
time.
flipping.
Title takes a long time to come in.
Yeah.
Like
Everything's so slow.
everything is just slower.
Crazy.
It's more arduous. It's just I don't know how to. It's like moving a big boulder. You know what I mean? Down a rocky road. And yes, you get there eventually.
You get there.
But it's an absolute grind to get to the finish line.
Yeah, it's funny now because I do a lot of flips in like Seattle, the metro, and like you can close on a house to buy if with cash or hard money in like 4 days, and you sell to retail buyers. My record in California before I moved out of there, 2-week close with a mortgage. Done with a mortgage. 2 weeks from contract to close.
Yeah.
But when you do stuff not in New York, the buyer basically has until the end of the contract to wiggle out of there.
Yeah.
So you never know if you're closing.
Yeah. So you have the opposite in New York where it's like you're going to have that buyer on the hook, right? But you just don't know when it's going to close.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part.
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons to both of them.
Yeah.
But I do think that, if you're able to do it here, you can do it anywhere.
That's honestly how I've been able to be so successful in other areas where I've lived because
you're in the major leagues.
Yeah, I'm so used to playing for the Yankees. When I go play for the Minnesota Twins, I'm like, oh, there's not that many fans in the stands here.
I mean, it's literally the difference between, to me, the majors and the minors, right?
Seriously, it's crazy. It's crazy. I remember when we first went into Delaware, when Brett moved down there, I bought a house and we just signed like a glorified piece of toilet paper. And then 3 weeks later, I'm on the deed and I own it and we're rehabbing it. And I go, man, what was that? It was a contract? It made it's just crazy. In Texas, it was the same thing. It's wild.
The whole thing is totally different. So
I kind of love New York though, because of the barrier to entry and the low inventory. And they're like, especially in Long Island, it's literally an island. They're not making more land. The Hudson Valley's getting super congested. They're both suburbs of Manhattan, which is the best economy in the country. So you have a good market to actually flip the properties in. So that's why I'm so bullish on New York for the long run, because of the desirability, and it's beautiful. You got the beaches, I got the mountains, the city's right in between us.
Good schools,
high taxes for good schools.
Yes.
A lot of wealth here. It's a good area, right? And it's a great place to be. So that's why I believe in this, economy, and the market and the rental market and the sophistication. It's worth it because you have the infrastructure here to support, the high prices.
Yes. Now, when we talk about this, right, you mentioned that property that you had sold for $100,000 on the lake, right?
Oh yeah, that was crazy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know this has happened for me, right? I look at properties that I flipped. I've seen properties that I've flipped that have now gone back up for sale, right?
Me too.
And I see the price that they're going for. Actually, my electrician that I work with, he just bought a house that was in the same community, the same exact model as the first flip I did. Okay.
Really? Was it that REO?
It was at REO that
yeah.
I bought for $161,000. His was in better shape, but he bought it in the 4s. Okay. Now it needed work. He's done a lot of work to it. He bought it in the 4s. When you have what has the market of 2015, right, to the market of now, right? What have you seen change? The good and the bad, right? What have you seen change, and what is your outlook now for the future based on what you've seen?
So I'll talk New York specifically and then just the real estate business in general. So in New York, I'm in the same boat as you. I remember I flipped a property in my hometown in 2021, top of the market. People were blown away. I got the number I got for it. It was a full rehab. $375 I sold it for. That property today would sell for $550 to $600. And that was in 2021.
Yeah.
It's insane. Same thing in Middletown, all these areas.
What do you think it's worth now?
$550 to $600. Because it's like anything in Monroe is $550 to $600.
Gotcha.
Like buy levels. Insanity. And they were like, Greg, I can't believe you got $375 for that. And it was beautiful. It looked like new construction. It's insane. So like I look back, but then at the same time, I'm like, that money I made on that house helped me grow my business. So it's like, if I kept it as a rental, sure, I'd look great on paper. But like that $90,000 that I made on that property back then helped me grow my business to get it to where it's at now.
No, I know.
So I've seen the New York values climb substantially from 2015. Like it's insane. Back in 2015, you could buy a buy level in Monroe for like $200,000. And that was like, okay, you got like an okay deal on it. Now those are $550, $600. It's just crazy, right? Crazy. The numbers in the Hudson Valley are insane. Middletown, you could buy a crappy REO for 35, 40,000 on like a nice big one family, those are worth like 350 to 400 now. Two families, get them for 80 grand. Now they're worth 450.
Yeah.
It's insanity there because of like people are coming up from the city. They're coming to Long Island. They're coming to those areas. So I've seen the New York market skyrocket. I don't know if that's sustainable.
No.
I can't see that. I could see it maybe going up 3-4% a year.
Yeah.
But I don't see it having
But it's
that COVID
a strong
spike.
market to say that, hey, the demand is there, the lack of available land, right? The inability to expand your home. Yeah, like all those things, like those fuel
a good real estate market. Yeah. It's the same with Seattle. You're surrounded by water and mountains. New York, unless you want to go into Sullivan County or like Albany, you're kind of jammed in that valley, right? And Long Island, you're literally in the ocean. So I've seen the New York market appreciate a lot. I think it will still go up, but not like it was. The overall real estate industry, it's like I always say real estate years is like dog years with the way things change. It's like 1 year is really 7. So back in the day, I mean, we were spending like $2,000 a month on direct mail. We'd get a deal guaranteed.
Yes. I remember. It was like $2,000 to $3,000. Yeah,
and you get
it
like
was a little bit more. I remember spending $10,000 on direct mail, and I got 2 deals out of it.
Oh my God, that $5,000 cost per deal. I would,
everybody.
I would do wild stuff for that right now.
Yeah,
That's not the case in my area.
I know.
And your area.
Yes.
I know that for sure.
Long Island residents, do you have a house that you want to potentially sell off market, your terms, your timeline, your way, or do you know of somebody that could benefit from that? Then definitely give us a call. You can reach out to us at 631-333-SELL. The number is below, or visit our website at SuffolkCountyHouseBuyers.com. And for any deal that you refer over to us where you are not the seller, the first deal you refer to us, we pay a $5,000 referral fee. The second deal, we pay a $10,000 referral fee. And get this, the third deal that you refer to us, we will split the profits with you 50-50. And some of our deals are multiple 6 figures, so this can be a life-changing amount of money. It could pay for weddings. It could pay for college, anything that you choose from. So please take advantage of this great opportunity. Once again, we're looking for off-market opportunities where a seller wants to sell on their terms, their timeline, their way.
So I've seen marketing go from very affordable, non-saturated to expensive and hyper-competitive. Back in the day, like if there was another investor bidding on a property in the Hudson Valley, it was like, oh my God, they're calling 2 people. Like now it's like they're calling 3-4 people no matter what. They're getting multiple offers. Your response rates are going to be going down in mail. The cost per click on digital is going up. You got to really be dialed in this market to be successful because there's so many more people who want to do it. There's a lot of dumb money out there in marketing where people are spending stupid money on ads. They don't know what they're doing. They're driving the costs up. So I've just seen it get a lot more competitive. But at the same time, I've seen the good operators who are willing to kind of adjust and adapt and improve still find a way to be successful. The people I saw get hurt when the COVID happened and the interest rates especially were the ones who were buying properties at the wrong numbers and the wrong fundamentals. And the wholesalers I saw get hurt were the ones who were relying on like these hedge funds to buy properties from them. And their business literally went away overnight.
Yes.
And we've never had that hedge funds in New York, so I've never really gotten involved in that.
It sounded cool at the time.
Sounded like free money to me. Sign me up there. Let's go to Charlotte, North Carolina.
You were basically an order taker.
Literally. For the tune of $20,000 a deal.
Yeah.
And you could pay like 100% of market value and sell it to these guys for 10% over premium. And it's like,
and they buy
you don't got to be good. You could be you could get some knucklehead on the phone who can't get 3 words out of his mouth to make an offer of 100% of ARV, sign a PSA, and assign that for $15,000.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be good to do that. But now with the market, you have to be good. You have to have talent. You have to be skilled. You have to be persistent. You got to understand your numbers. And it's like, it's a real business.
And no, it's a real business. So I want to get into this, which we haven't discussed is, you've also had some roles in the education space, sales training, things of that nature, right? I remember when I first started.
Yeah, how do we even... we met online, right? Through John Martinez?
No, I don't. I forget what happened. I think I may have just like reached out to you and said, hey, like, I know you operate upstate New York. I'm on Long Island. And you're like, oh, okay. And it was just
we got on the phone or something.
We didn't even talk. You were like, oh, you were like very like friendly. You were like, oh, okay. Yeah, definitely like stay in touch, yada, yada, yada. And then I guess you started hearing my name a bit more. And then one day out of the blue, you're like, hey, like, I give you a call. I'd love to connect. And I was like, yeah, sure. And you're like, I've been hearing your name like bounce around a lot. I was like, I got to call this guy, right? So, but I had known you through John Martinez's sales training, right? Because I realized like, oh, okay, like I have to really get good. My team has to really get good at talking to sellers, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to go back to, I always tell this story where when I first started doing direct to seller marketing, right? I told my wife, I said, hey, I had made, it was my second flip. I made like 10,000, which wasn't much. I said, I'm going to take this money and I'm going to put it into a direct to seller campaign. What's that?
What's that?
Well,
What's that?
I'm going to send postcards and letters to people's houses. Doing what? Offering to buy their house. And she's like, and why would you do that? Well, because they may want to sell to me at a discount.
In Long Island.
In Long Island. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Who would ever sell their house at a discount? I was like, I don't know, but I on these bank-owned properties, I keep getting outbid by people. I don't know how they're paying for it. I don't know if they're like, have some kind of indentured servitude. I don't know if they're stealing materials from Home Depot. I don't know how they could possibly be making the money. Am I misreading the numbers? I'm not sure. But I know that a lot of people around the country are doing this direct-to-seller marketing thing, okay? And they're getting people to sell their house at a discount. She's like, yeah, that sounds like a bogus idea. And here we are, hundreds of houses later.
Combined like 600-700 properties, like almost 1,000.
And to this day, she's the attorney, as you know, for the business. She's handled all the contracts. To this day, she still doesn't understand why, right? But it's an emotional decision for many people. It's a lot of times it's a logical decision. Hey, I need convenience. I've dealt with many people that is completely logical. I need to sell, right? New York's a hard market to transact real estate.
Nothing happens quickly, so it's not like an ATM for your house here.
Yeah, but here, like if you have the right systems, you can make it relatively fast, right? We can make it 3 to 4 weeks, which is light speed in New York,
no
right?
problem.
Like we're able
that's
to do.
Easy. Yeah.
That's easy,
that's
right?
easy.
We can do that.
Yeah.
We can do that. Your average buyer cannot,
no,
right?
that's 6 to 8 if you're lucky.
Yeah, and so when we're able to do that and we're able to make it simple for them, but it's ultimately an emotional decision, right? Yeah. And so you did a lot of sales training for people that were looking to either train themselves or train their team to be able to talk to sellers, right? Dive into that a little bit, because I think for people who are watching this who say like, how do I ever get somebody to sell their house to me at a discount? Not in a sleazy way, right? But in a way that like you are getting to the heart of why people are calling you in the first place, because they can just put it on the open market. But you need to get to the heart of why they're calling you. Like, how have you done that, and how have you helped others do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a huge deal, because I see a lot of people, they spend a lot of money on marketing, and like I said, they can't get 2 words out of their mouth. They call the mailer and they're like, and you're like, oh, I'm not selling this guy my house. I think conversion of the actual seller is just as important, if not more important, than actually the advertising, because the advertising is just going to get you the lead. So what I've been taught and what I've evolved that over time is really just, number one, getting the seller to look at you as like a trusted advisor and not necessarily like a house buyer or whatever the case is. And like my strategy that I do is like, obviously we'll set up front agreements, we'll, find out why they're selling. We'll see how it's impacting them. How is it a big deal? Is it a little deal? How long you've been selling? You asking like those why questions, kind of like a therapist peeling the onion back, and figuring out like, given what they're saying, because we're listening and summarizing what they're saying so they know we're actually listening to them, like building that tactical empathy. Given all that, does a cash offer make sense for you? Does it actually make sense to do this, right?
Because sometimes I'll tell them, hey,
I say no all the time.
Yeah, like we're not the right people for you.
This is not a fit.
I want as much money as possible. Okay, you willing to wait potentially 6 months?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're not.
This
is not us. Here's a realtor. Listing referral. So we're really good at figuring out why they're selling, jumping under the hood on like what's actually going on with the property and with their situation, because a lot of people, they're living in a nice property, but they're in an ugly situation. Like they haven't paid their taxes or whatever the case is, or they have a good situation, like they're rich, but they have an ugly property. So they want to get rid of it for convenience sake. So we try to investigate both of those things. And then in terms of like closing them, it's like, number one, you got to understand like what you're up against. So like if we know that we're, competing with 4 other buyers, we're going to try to get them, if we've built enough trust and rapport and respect, to have them give us the last look if they are going to get multiple offers. And then obviously we have the opportunity to match or beat that offer. That's more of like a tactical thing if that's the angle they're going down. But we'll figure all that out with a proper sales call when we actually diagnose their situation and see, sometimes asking price. They'll say, oh, I want $500,000 for my house. And then like, meanwhile, you buy it for $300K 2 hours later. And it's like, that was like a smoke screen. But if you just took that, if you took that at face value, like, oh, this isn't motivated. But then you spend an hour on the phone with them. Well, I really would like 500, but I owe 400. Okay, and then, you work them down and whatnot. Obviously, making an offer that's like an anchor so you don't like shoot yourself in the foot. There's all these like tactical strategies. But the biggest thing that I've seen recently with me and Brett, because I still get involved in the sellers from time to time, is I literally just think to myself, if I'm on the phone with the seller, how do I help this person?
Sure.
Is there an opportunity for me to help them? And I'll give them good advice. I'll say, like, listen, based on what you're saying, this doesn't make sense. Like, we spoke about your house, the thing's in perfect condition, it's worth $600K. You should list your house on the market with a realtor and, get top dollar for it. And I don't think a cash offer makes any sense. That's like reverse psychology. Because if they really don't want to do that, they're going to say, well, I know all that, but of course I'd want to get the most money, but I really don't want people coming to my house.
Okay.
How come you don't want people coming to your house? And then whatever they say, you can then use to investigate further. And as you're like trying to almost push them away, they're giving you something that you can kind of drill deeper on and really get to the root of the problem to then hopefully justify a win-win situation that makes sense for you and them. Does that make sense?
It does.
I could talk about this for 5 hours.
Well, because it's true. I mean, at the end of the day, right, it is likely their most valuable asset.
For sure.
They are, in essence, paying you to make their life easier.
Absolutely.
Right? And I'm a big fan. Like, I like people who make my life easy. I put a lot of value on
I
those.
pay premiums for things that make no sense.
Yeah. You know what I mean? And in essence, you're paying us for a premium, right? Because we're good at making your life easier in what's a complex situation,
Correct.
right? Like, my attorney is my wife, title company we use, we have everything systematized.
Yep.
As long as what you're telling us is the truth, we'll make it as easy for you as we possibly can. And then I take a lot of pride in making their lives easier. But if they say, hey, I really need this because I need, every bit of this money to be able to, to move down south or, have enough left over to be able to live off of. Okay, that's fine. Now let's dive into the timeline. Are you okay with this taking a while? Because it can, no matter what. Like, I'm a professional home buyer, but I'm also a professional seller too.
Yeah.
So I'm on the other side of it.
Yeah.
And
Me too. Yeah. It happens all the time. It takes a long time to sell these flips, dude.
It takes a long time to sell and they're perfect condition. Like,
turnkey, baby.
I'll have 50 people go through my house is what a seller will tell me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but you can only pick one. And you don't know what that buyer is going to be like.
Yep.
With us, you know what it's going to be like. Here's our reviews. Here's our testimonials. Here's our systems. This buyer, it's probably the first house that they're ever buying.
Yep.
You don't know what you're getting into. Totally fine if you want to take that risk.
Yep.
That's fine. But if you are under the gun and you need to close by a certain time, that's not a risk that I would suggest that you take.
100%. And they respect you for that because you're giving them the lens of the other side where it's like, yes, you might get an extra $100,000 for your house, but that buyer could also get denied for their mortgage a week before closing. And now all your plans are screwed up because you got to throw it back on the market and you got to give them their earnest money back.
Yes.
Right. Because like you and I know these things and we could do it in our sleep because we know the real estate systems and the laws and whatnot. But a typical seller, like you said, they're never doing that. Right. This is the one and done most likely. So we've just found with the sellers, it's like, when we're honest with them and we really figure out what we can do to help them, and we almost try to push them away, like genuinely, like, hey, like the cash offer is like the last thing you want to do, like, why don't you list it? When they start giving us all the reasons why they don't want to do the things we're recommending, the next logical thing is that cash offer or a novation, which is a whole nother, strategy, which is popular now, which I think will be illegal probably in like 5 years.
And we'll touch on, that in a moment. Do you feel like when the transaction's done, like by and large, most of these sellers is there any regret on their part? No, right?
Not because we have a good system like you do where we make the things so simple for them, as simple as it can be. Yeah, are there things that come up that are out of our control? Of course, title issues, whatnot. But I would say 98% of the sellers, and even the ones we wholesale, because they knew off the bat what was going down before a contract ever got signed, are happy with our services.
Gotcha.
And they respect us. And we get referrals.
Well, listen, on my end, right, people see there's times we buy houses, we do very little work, and a couple weeks later, it's on the market.
I just did that. I was a pump and dump. Zero work.
Yes. But at the end of the day, like those same sellers that probably saw us list a house for like a lot more, they gave us a stellar review.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Did everything we did everything we said we were going to do pertaining to their transaction. And even if we're selling it for, $80K higher as is, we're willing to take the risk on to potentially deal with a flaky buyer that could set us back 3 months. Because it's New York. Right? Like you said, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. But that's the thing that it took me a while to get over that. Like, why would someone sell their house at a steep discount? But like now being in this business for 10 years, I understand it makes sense.
Yes.
Right? And they trade equity for convenience.
Yeah,
That's it.
and that's really what it is,
Yep.
and that's something that my wife still doesn't really quite like understand because she wouldn't
Yeah.
do it. By the same token, neither would I
Neither
at this
would I,
point.
yeah,
Because,
yeah.
but I wouldn't.
But
do
we
it.
know the game, though.
We know what to
We
do.
know what's
We're
going on.
professional sellers,
Yeah,
so like
yeah.
I know how to mitigate as many issues. And even still, with the 10,000 steps we do to mitigate
gotten
all the
burnt.
issues,
Yep.
you still get burned.
All the time.
Happens all the
It's
time.
just because you can't control it. Like
Yeah.
if you get a solid, let's say you're flipping a house, turnkey house, 100 G's in that thing. It's like the nicest house on the block. You get the most qualified buyer ever. You know, they lease a Range Rover the week before closing, as our friend Joe says.
Yes.
They get denied. Now you're done.
Yes.
You got to give them, because you got to read the contract. You know,
Yeah.
mortgage contingency.
Yes. Now you can mitigate that because you have the mortgage contingency clause. You can say once they get their commitment, it's firm. So that is a way. That is a way we've mitigated it.
Yeah.
But even still, like a lot of these people, Joe talked about it, 2 weeks ago on the podcast. They get these pre-approvals. It's not worth the paper that it's printed
piece
on.
of toilet paper.
It's garbage, right?
Yep.
You don't know that, and the mortgage loan officer is going to lie through his teeth because he'll roll the dice because there's no skin off of his.
He doesn't care.
He doesn't care.
He's not paying for the appraisal.
It doesn't matter. And if it's denied, yeah, sorry, what
On
can
to
I
the
do?
next, buddy.
On to the next, right?
Yep.
And that's all you can do. So, and that's a risk that we take, right? We're willing to take that risk so you don't have to.
That's another thing I want to touch on before we do the novation thing. This is the thing I've realized about, like, especially house flippers or landlords. You have the most skin in the game if it doesn't work out. Like, a realtor, they might pay for picture. And there's great realtors out there. I love realtors because, if you have a good realtor, it'll help you a lot. Ultimately, they have not a lot of skin in the game.
Nope.
Title company, barely anything. A loan guy, there's great loan guys, and that's a very valuable thing. But if a deal doesn't work out, we're holding the bag for another 3-4 months to sell it. The other people I'm sorry about that. Home inspector got paid day one. So when you're the investor, you have the most skin in the game. So you usually are the most kind of eager to get things progressing because every day is $300-400 and you have the liability of the house. And I think a lot of times in real estate transactions, the incentives are a little off with things. So that's why I used to get bothered by it, but now I just kind of accept it and understand that's how it is. And I don't let it bother me.
Yeah.
Because it can eat you alive.
It can.
It really does.
It can, and we talked about that incentive that I've started putting in. I think you started doing it.
I just copied and pasted that, dude.
Yeah,
Worked like a charm on my last flip.
Yeah,
21-day close in New York. Can
we
you believe
give
it?
buyers incentives, depending on the size of the deal and the timeline, a few $1,000 incentive.
Yep.
If you can close by the honor, and we do it after contract, right? I don't want it to be something that's part of the negotiation, right?
You put it in a rider.
We put in a separate rider after we're in contract. Because they're not going to say no, because they're going to be like, you lose nothing. Like, hey, if you close by this date, I'll give you whatever it is, $1,000, $2,000. And if you don't, no big deal, right? But you have nothing to lose.
All good, yeah.
All good.
That worked like a charm.
And that
for me,
works. That works. That gives incentive to people to get to the closing table.
Yeah, and there was only one offer on that property.
Yeah.
And it worked.
It worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So, all right. So a lot of regulations are starting to come out about wholesaling, right?
Yeah.
Was it South Carolina, right?
South Carolina is illegal.
Illegal. It's
Outlawed.
illegal.
Zilch.
Pennsylvania.
Zilchy.
Yeah.
Philly, it was always been bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, PA is toast.
So now the way that you would traditionally wholesale in certain states, and a lot of people feel, I know Eric Brewer just presented on
Great
this.
guy.
Great guy at CG just last month, right? Wholesaling as he knew it in his market where he did a lot of wholesaling is dead.
Are you pertaining to assignments? The actual assignment business.
The assignment business is dead, right?
Yeah.
What do you see on the horizon for things like wholesaling, novations, right? These unconventional ways of selling homes.
Yeah.
What do you think lies down the
So
road?
wholesaling, I believe, is a little more straightforward than a novation based on, like an assignment of contract. It's pretty straightforward. The novation is like a loophole kind of, because it's basically a net listing.
Yes.
Where you're netting a seller a number, and then you're keeping the difference.
Yeah.
Obviously, contractually, it's different, right? But it's basically that, and you can legally do that in like 3 states. I think Texas, Florida, and California.
Yes.
Believe it or not.
You
Gavin Newsom land. You can do net listings.
You could do net listings
and rip huge commissions, but not in New York or Washington, where I am. So the novation is what people have been doing since probably 2022. I'd say they got popular.
Yeah, about 3 years
when the
ago,
rates went up.
Yeah, they started to get more.
So you're
popular.
basically getting paid by the seller to get your contract replaced, and you're on the hook to basically pay the commissions and put punch list items. It's like basically a glorified wholesale deal on the MLS. So we are doing them, and we're doing them in New York, and they're not easy because there's a lot of red tape, like we mentioned earlier. But I think that those strategies right now, if you can pull them off and you have a good system for doing them, are great ways to monetize the leads you're already bringing in and just bring extra revenue in the door that doesn't cost you any more money. I think long term, though, assignments will be hyper regulated nationwide. And in Washington, there's actually an interesting law that's probably getting passed next year with any off-market cash purchase. And I think novations eventually will follow because you're controlling real estate without owning it. You're marketing real estate without owning it. You're not a licensed realtor doing it. So I think eventually the board of realtors is just going to get involved in this and probably squash them and find ways to, put some laws in where if you're in contract, you can't market the house. And they'll find a way to basically torpedo it. But I think you got to take advantage of it now because it might not be here in 3 years with these two instruments how you can make money. So I like them. I think if you do them ethically and transparently, they can be great, legit win-win situations with novations because people think with a novation, why wouldn't the seller just list the house themselves? And I thought that for like 2 years.
Yes.
I couldn't wrap my head around it.
Because again, and I think... So for those who are watching, don't understand what a novation is, what you're basically doing is you're going into contract. You should go into contract with the intention of buying the house.
Yeah, just like a regular deal with an earnest money deposit.
Right?
Yeah.
But then you list that property on the open market, right? And you list it with the hopes of getting an end buyer, not an investor, right?
Oh, retail buyer.
A retail buyer, okay? And then what happens is you basically swap out yourself from the contract, right? And now the seller is in contract with the end buyer, okay? And whatever price is agreed on, let's say you're going to pay the seller $300,000, the end buyer is going to pay $380,000. All the expenses that are associated with that sale, the realtor fees, the closing costs, any repair fees that come up, they're on you, right? So you're this middleman, right, that is basically taking care of all the fees. The seller is not dealing with any of that, right? So it is the benefit.
They're getting convenience.
They're getting convenience. They're just not getting speed.
Speed is not there.
So with wholesaling, it's typically speed and convenience. With novation, it's simply convenience. But it may not be fast. Because for a lot of sellers, they're like, hey, I don't want to pay commissions. I don't want to deal with buyers, going down my throat about this repair and that repair. I don't want to deal with anything. I just want to be able to show up at the closing, whether it's 3 months from now, 4 months from now, not have to deal with any of the bullshit and just give me my check. That's where a novation is handy. That's where it comes in, but you have to obviously be, as the buyer, right, the middleman in this situation, right, not the end buyer, but the middleman. You have to be the person that has the funds to close if the deal goes south, and you have to be a professional seller like we are, where we can mitigate all those issues.
Picking the right buyer, the pre-approvals, the punch list items.
And so that this thing actually
we know that, though, so it gives us an advantage.
So there is value to doing an novation, and so I don't want to poo-poo it.
Yeah.
But by the same token, like Greg said, like there's realtors, right, with that maybe not as much on the novation side because a realtor
they're getting paid on that. They're getting full commission.
Realtors that are not getting their chunk of the pie because too many wholesale deals are
that's
happening.
A problem.
That could be an issue. And obviously, the board of realtors, they have obviously a lot of money to be.
NAR is huge.
NAR is huge. The ability to lobby for big changes down the line, like that could very much come down and, change wholesaling as we know it.
And another thing too, to just kind of, wrap up the wholesaling thing is that obviously you got this is like back end. This is like dispositions kind of problems with realtors and whatnot. The actual consumer protection issues with wholesaling, and I see this in Washington because I call it the Seattle jungle there because there's so many snakes. Sure. And there's actually no snakes in Western Washington for the most part, but there's snakes in the real estate market. It's insane. These dirtbags will go lock a deal up because there's no attorneys. They'll put a $100 EMD in. They'll have an invalid contract with no legal description. They'll never submit the EMD. They'll take the contract. They'll record it with Pierce County or King County. So now it's like a lien on the title. It's at a bad number to begin with because they don't know what they're doing. And then they won't close because they can't find a buyer. They'll never not record the lien, which is basically fraud because they never put a deposit down on the contract that wasn't valid.
Yeah.
And then they'll call me. This happened to me. They'll call me, the seller. I'll try to buy it to flip it. And then there's a lien on the title. And then the wholesaler wants $20,000. And he's holding the consumer hostage. Yeah. And she has to pay her property taxes or else she gets foreclosed.
Yeah. And
it's disgusting.
It's disgusting. It's disgraceful. And those are the people that obviously realtors, the community see. Yeah. And it gives people a bad name. It's like flippers that, put, lipstick on a pig.
Just cover up the...
It gives the industry a bad name.
Landlords, slumlords.
Yeah, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So obviously, and you hate to say it, but it's a few bad apples ruin it for everybody
The
else.
whole tree
because
gets ruined.
There is value in being able to wholesale a property.
Yep.
You're providing a service to the seller, provide you, as Greg talked about.
Yep.
Being transparent.
Yep. It's huge.
Like that. That's the big part of it. But then there's these people and the fact that they're able to do that in some of these other states.
It's crazy. They don't even have a valid contract.
Yeah.
They never submit EMD.
Yeah.
That's fraud.
I know.
That's legit fraud, dude.
Yeah. And they get away with it.
I know.
Yeah.
Until they don't, when they get busted.
Don't.
Yeah.
And then eventually, laws are going to be enacted to prevent that. But then, sellers are going to lose the ability to have that same convenience, right?
It's ultimately going to hurt the consumer if they do add regulation, because then it's just going to be harder to transact, right? And they're going to have more situations. But Washington State actually is just passing a law. I believe it's going to go into effect next year, to where if you buy a house off market, whether you wholesale it or not, you could, even if you're a cash buyer like you and me, the seller's obligated to get an appraisal that you pay for. And if the appraisal is more than the contract price, they can terminate the contract. Yeah. No repercussions. So they're basically getting you to give them a free appraisal.
Yes.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Stupid. But it is what it is.
Yeah. All right. So I want to wrap it up with what I feel is, the crux of all this, which is, again, going back to the 20-year-old Greg Helbeck, right? What you did, to me, it's always remarkable, right? Because there's so much to wrap your head around in real estate.
Yeah.
Right. And to be able to do that I had trouble as a 30-year-old, right? I was an attorney. I graduated law school. I had a hard time wrapping my head around it, right? You did it as a 20-year-old. To me, is phenomenal, right? And it goes back to what you said earlier. I was willing to do anything, right? Because I didn't want to have a job, right?
Yeah.
And I always say, right, you either take risks or you take orders.
That's dude. I should get that tattooed. Dude, that's fire.
Yeah, right. You
take risks or you take orders,
right? And
that's a writer downer right there.
And you took risks,
yes,
right? So for the next Greg Helbeck that's listening to this, that's 20 years old, it may not be real estate, right?
Yeah.
And might feel like, am I too young? Am I too naive? I actually think that being naive sometimes is one of the best.
Huge advantage.
Yeah, one of the best things that you could happen. Because if you knew about everything that could go wrong,
oh my gosh,
and all the problems, right? It's like parents. Like, people don't know how.
I'm afraid to check my phone half the day.
Yeah,
it's just a jungle out there.
It's a jungle. If you knew it, if the 20-year-old Greg Helbeck could look at what a 30-year-old Greg Helbeck and everything that you have to go through on a daily basis, the 20-year-old Greg Helbeck may not have done it. They might have said, "Oh, screw that.
I'm going to Wall Street.
I'm doing something else," right?
Yeah.
So for the 20-year-old out there that's listening, that's taking that next leap, best advice you have for them?
I would say it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's honestly worth it. All the BS, the drama, it's a lot, and it's stressful, and there's ups and downs. No business is perfect. You're going to be involved in your business, whether you have teammates or not, but it's worth it. Your freedom is worth any price you have to pay.
Yeah.
Within reason, obviously. You're not going to go rob a bank, obviously, but
yeah,
your freedom and the ability to do what you want with who you want, when you want, and be able to travel is worth the price of admission, whatever that might be.
Yes.
So I would say that's worth it, and it is a dogfight. It will always be a dogfight.
It forever will be.
But it's stimulating, and it keeps you on your toes, and your freedom is worth it 100%. Okay. Your financial freedom, obviously,
And the being naive and being ignorant.
Yeah. It's a bliss sometimes.
It's a bliss.
Especially when you're young and you're like, all right, I got 3 G's in the bank. I'm living with my parents. I'm in college. If I lose my money from marketing, all right, I'll just go flip some more stuff at garage sales and build it back up again.
Yeah.
So you got to, I think if you're really young, I know guys who started younger than me, they have an even bigger advantage. They're 18. They just can legally, get a driver or whatever. They can, whatever.
They could just drive a car. Yeah. That's it. Vote,
you could sign legal docs at 18. You're not necessarily a minor anymore. That's even a bigger advantage. The younger you are, the better, right? And there's so many, you can learn so much now. You can use ChatGPT. That wasn't even a remote possibility 5 years ago.
The amount of tools that exist
you could use ChatGPT to teach you wholesale, and you could be 18 signing contracts, doing deals by your 19th birthday, and you're good.
Yeah. And my biggest regret, was honestly, going through school, kind of somewhat losing a decade. There were certain elements that it helped me a lot in my business. But if I had to do it over again, the best advice I could give you is don't do what I did, which was be like a student from afar for, 5 to 10 years. Take action now, like what you did.
Take action. It's worth it.
All right. Well, buddy, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
You're a great interviewer, man. That was a fun one. This was a good one. We went a while.
We did go a while. So, guys, I hope you enjoy it. Okay. And as always, if you have a house to sell, please keep us in mind. Suffolk County house buyers, like I said, first deal, $5,000. Second deal you bring to us, $10,000. And the third deal, we split with you 50-50. Thanks so much for watching.